Well, it was 1974, January. I suddenly realized I had enough credits to leave high school. And I had been attending a junior college at Cabrillo with some aviation related classes. And I continued on with that after I left. Dad had bought a 182 Skyline 69, beautiful airplane, about a 200-hour airplane. We paid 18,500 for it, or Dad did. And I flew Dad around to look at horses and judge horse shows, and I was building time, and I was getting to fly in all kinds of different airplanes. A lot of them that people at Dad knew, Barons and Bonanzas and a Duke, and always loved the Beechcraft airplanes. Although the old Cessna 182 is a good airplane. And when my dad's partner, Harry Marks, owner of Marks Chevrolet Buick in Gilroy, found out that I was getting out of high school, he said, we're going to develop the South County Airport. And I have signed to take over as a caretaker of the South County Airport, which was simply a touch and go strip at the time. It was 3,100 foot long with oil and screenings, which is not really good surface. It tears up tires. But they wanted someone to come in and put in the first temporary FBO, the administration building and flight school type of a building and a hangar and a 10,000 gallon fuel tank and acquire a fuel truck and put in tie down areas. And that's primarily what I did the first 6 months or so. And at the same time, Harry Marks he was a mover, and it started out as South Valley Aviation. He signed a deal with Piper, and the first three airplanes we took, late 74, 75, was a Warrior and a Cherokee 180 and a Cherokee Aero. And I was 18. I got to go back and ferry these things back from Vero Beach to build time. And at the same time, Harry bought a 1966 Aztec from Western Piper over in Fresno, and he really got in the thing right. It was a 1,000-hour airplane. It belonged to Fess Parker. And of course, Harry was a car guy. He wouldn't buy anything unless it was just primo. This thing was really nice, other than it had a red and leather interior. And so I got my multi-engine rating in that, and we were dialing along. And the South County Airport was one of those things where it was out of the scene of the movie Build It and He Will Come. Well, they came, and they come in droves. From the minute we could tie an airplane down there, we had a tie-down area we had made, people were moving in. And people were hanging out. They wanted to see what we were doing. They would come by just to see the show. And things were happening actually rather quickly. And I ended up instructing there by the time I was 19. And the first year that I instructed and flew Harry Marks's personal business, I had flown 1,100 hours total. I was using primarily a new Seneca 2 or an older Aztec that we'd have around. I flew them back and forth to Elko, Nevada and Lovelock, Nevada, where the other car dealers were. So that was a real good opportunity for me to build multi-engine time. In addition, I ended up in the sales end of it too. We had a salesman that was unsuccessful, and he bought a lot of bad and traded for a lot of bad inventory. And so the first year after acquiring a CFI, I'd flown 1,100 hours total, and got into aircraft sales and managed to sell 13 light aircraft the first year. So we were busy, and things were just always going on. Sometimes you didn't know what was going to happen next, but people would come in and want to bring in another airplane, or they wanted to see if they could operate off the airport, and so it was real interesting times. Harry Marks was into a lot of different businesses, and all the people in Gilroy knew who he was. He was a no baloney car salesman. He'd go in there, and if you weren't careful, you could be just having a cup of coffee to sell you a car. It was a different environment then. He would bring the invoice out, slam a little on a profit on the bottom and roll it. And that was his mentality with sales and so forth. And so we had the California Highway Patrolman learning to fly with us. We had people from a local air conditioning and body shop out buying light airplanes from us, learning to fly. And I think I had about over 20 people locally that we, taught how to fly that year. South County Airport was also the home of the Flying Lady restaurant. And it is a shame, but the Flying Lady restaurant is no longer. But it was built by Irv Perch, who was the founder of Aristocrat Trailers in the 60s. And he sold out the Boise Cascade for a rather large number and built Hill Country, which was a golf course, museum, restaurant set up on a couple hundred acres there in the foothills of Morgan Hill. It was a gorgeous place. First restaurant was round. It's called the Flying Lady Restaurant. And people come in, especially on the weekends, from all around to eat. It was a good place to eat. It's affordable. And go to the museum. He had 2 large hangars, and he had a lot of neat stuff himself. He had a Ford Tri-Motor, was probably the neatest. He had bought for his wife a lot of replicas of biplanes, a lot of biplanes that were the real deal. He had a large car collection. He had a lot of warbirds in there because at the time, an owner of a warbird could not pay property tax in California if the airplanes were on display in a museum. And the airstrip was right down the middle of the golf course. It was about 4,500 feet long, so it was more than adequate to bring these airplanes in and take them out as necessary. So the Flying Lady restaurant was a huge draw card. And later on, Herb built the Flying Lady 2 restaurant, which was the largest restaurant in the world on the West Coast at the time. And he was a neat guy. He was always up there. He worked continuously. He was a workaholic. And he eventually went back manufacturing the American Clipper there in Morgan Hill. And they had a little accident incident up there in the 90s that shut them down. And it was a real shame. It was a place where aviation people, it was like Disneyland. You were constantly surrounded by aviation paraphernalia and models hanging from the ceiling. And then, of course, when you went into the hangar, you could put yourself in a whole new dimension. And just it was a fabulous place. At any rate, in about 1978, I get a call from Harry Marks one day and his partner Walt Davis, and they bring me down and offer me to be a partner in South Valley Piper. And I said, well, I'm really flattered about that. And Harry said, well, you've worked hard. You've been out there 7 days a week at times, and you are the South County Airport. You are South Valley Piper. You and Shoemaker and some of the other guys. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And I said, I just have other things to do. I couldn't see myself at 21 tied down in San Martin, California for the rest of my life, but I certainly got a lot out of it and had a lot of fun. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you something. He said, we had 2 guys come out of the woodwork. One of them's Gene Scarborough, owner of Scarborough Lumber in Scotts Valley. He said, and his sidekick dipshit friend, and he used those words. And the other Gene, they end up being 2 Genes Aviation. And Gene Scarborough was a hell of a guy. He was self-made, and he was a neat, no BS guy with a lot of money, and he just wasn't a very good pilot. The other Gene was a bumbling fool, Gene Macedon, and of course they did end up buying the place for a large, undisclosed amount of money. As well as I knew Harry Enwald, I could never pry it out of him. So in '78, it was sold and become 2 Genes Aviation, and it was the end of an era. But we certainly had a lot of fun there. Met a lot of great people. Met a lot of friends, and it was a great experience for me. I hope you like my story.